So I figured I'd make a bit more of a US centric video before we go into full foreign elections mode. If you need an argument as to why you should subscribe, we have the Canadian election on Monday, we have the UK election on Thursday, we have a Portuguese legislative election, we have an Australian legislative election, we have two rounds of the Polish election, all of which we will be covering extensively. So if you want to subscribe, you can subscribe to that. But I figured I'd make a US video because, it's the country I actually fucking live in. And there's some interesting stuff brewing um, for the coming years. This is a bit more of a theoretical video. It's not exactly like this poll has come out because at this point, we have to wait and see. I would broadly say that Democrats are favored in 2026 to retake the House and lose the Senate. We'll wait until like the second or third or fourth, since the first will be the UK elections to give predictions on that. But these future trends for each of the states are what interest me because I think in the coming few weeks we'll have a bit of discussion about Oklahoma for some reason. Thank you, Luke Gagnon, who you should subscribe to and laugh at. I think I'll put his channel linked in the description or something. But I figured I'd talk about something that I am qualified to talk about because I've been looking at this state for a while. In fact, for the last decade and a half, plus a little bit. Um, New York. So, New York, it's a shithole. But behind that shithole, you see a very right trending state, and you see an opportunity. Um, for the Democratic Party in New York to collapse in on itself. So, what happened is this was broadly an underperformance of expectations. Expectations were still pretty low in New York. The idea, besides for like retards on Twitter, was that Harris would probably lose a bit upstate. Nassau County was a toss up. She underperformed there. But for the most part, it should probably be like a 16, 17 point win. Trump did invest a little bit of time. He did, if I'm not mistaken, three rallies. One in the Bronx, one in Madison Square Garden, and one in Nassau at Uniondale, which I was actually at myself. It was great. I waited like 6 hours to get into it. I actually skipped school as well. They still don't know that. You don't go tattling on me. But invested a small amount of time into the state. Rumors it would be close. Those rumors, for the most part, dissipated when Biden dropped out. Um, but that work paid off because what happened in New York was nothing short of remarkable. The city, which people expected the city to shift a little bit Republican, but I don't think anyone expected it to shift this Republican. Um, we had the biggest Republican shifts were the Bronx, the Queens, Staten Island, then shortly below that, Brooklyn. You also had Nassau, Rockland. In between there, Rockland is heavily Jewish. That's why I shifted to Nassau. We'll get to Nassau later. But out of the top, what is that? Six uh, counties that shifted the most Republican, four of them were in New York City. What happened is Trump won Staten Island by 30, which, to put that in perspective, uh, Trump won Tennessee by less than Staten Island. Tennessee, one of the most solidly Republican states, went to Trump, and already Tennessee's shifting right off a cliff. But it went to Trump by less than Staten Island, which voted for Obama and Andrew Cuomo and elected a Democrat to Congress as recently as 2018. What an insane thought that the county would shift that Republican. Uh, and like the county shifted 15 points Republican. Like it was, that's about doubling the margin. In an already pretty Republican county with a large urban base, especially in the north of it, that is hard to overcome. And that's the story of New York because I've been saying this for a while, that I think eventually what you're going to see in the US is the rural areas vote solidly Republican for the most part. The suburbs vote somewhat Democrat, and the cities also vote somewhat Democrat. You will see in some places that the cities actually vote more Republican than the suburbs. And I think you kind of see this in Florida to some extent. You see some suburban areas like Duval, the Seminole voting like barely Republican. Yes, there is Jacksonville and Duval County, but for the most part, it's suburbs, especially Seminole is pretty suburban. And you see those voting like R+5 or so, and Florida's a bit of an exception. Um, it's one of these few areas where we've actually seen the city's trend heavily Republican, even more Republican than suburbs. But to some extent, you still do have pretty Republican suburban areas just because the state itself is a Republican landslide. But you almost saw Miami flip um, in 2024. And while I think trends in places like New York City, to some extent, especially on the presidential level, will take a while. I think eventually you will see Hispanics, Asians, especially in Queens, are a big part of New York City. Even some areas that are black, places like the Bronx, I think you'll eventually see them shift Republican. And while I think if you want a Miami Dade comparison, obviously the most recent and most pressing county that could be like Miami Dade is probably Clark County. But in the future, you can make an argument that like Queens is like Miami Dade, and then the rest of New York City eventually could narrow up a lot. Um, I think the GOP has a lot of potential in New York, and you see especially in suburban areas like Nassau and Suffolk. These are kind of ancestrally Republican counties that flipped to Biden. Suffolk was like virtually tied um, in 2020, but Nassau shifted a lot to Biden, like 6 points, if I'm not mistaken, because of, you know, suburban backlash to Trump. But I do think these areas are trending Republican. One, because New York Democrats are a complete failure, and Kathy Hochul is incredibly unpopular. Two, because especially a lot of the populist GOP message to the white working class appeals to these areas. You know, people think of suburbs as like extremely elitist areas, and like for the most part, you could explain a lot of Long Island as that. After all, this is literally where the Great Gatsby takes place. Um, you can look that up. It's like the northwestern corner of Nassau. But there are a lot of working class areas in Long Island, and it's pretty intimately intertwined, kind of like what I said for Jersey. They're intertwined with New York City. Even I myself commute to the city. Um, these areas like Westchester, Rockland, Putnam's kind of on the boundaries of it, but they're pretty invested in how the city is run, and the fact that the city has not been run quite so good has driven them Republican. Now, you haven't really seen upstate shift that Republican. You see in some areas like Clinton, Franklin, St. Louis, right on the Canadian border, but other than that, especially in like the northern Hudson Valley, which isn't that connected to New York City, it really hasn't shifted that Republican. Um, and I think that's where New York is going to be decided longish term. I think New York is eventually it's either going to keep shifting Republican, in which it just becomes a red state, which is insane to think about. Um, like that's a mind-boggling thought, but it's kind of like Florida, um, in which you would say like, oh, well, it can't be a Republican state because you'll just have Democrats run it up in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. Like, eventually, those counties are going to narrow. And I think you'll see a similar part where Queens eventually flips Republican in this scenario. Brooklyn, but mostly the Bronx, narrow a lot. Brooklyn actually doesn't seem that great for the GOP long term, only at an 11-point swing, which I think might be even less than the state shifted statewide. But I think you'll see Bronx, Queens narrow up a bit. Even places like Manhattan, Brooklyn, I think you'll see the GOP running up Staten Island, Nassau, Suffolk. Eventually, um, and upstate is going to shift a little bit Republican. That's scenario one. New York becomes like an R+4, R+5 state, or I think you'll see it become a swing state. If these trends soften a little bit and you see some of upstate shift left, I think if Democrats can run a pretty good campaign against Vance, the presumptive Republican nominee, come 2028, you could see some of these upstate counties shift left, and a county like Ontario flip Democrat. Maybe not Otsego because that's a bit too far gone. Cortland, maybe Clinton could flip back. Warren, not sure about Orange or Orange. Maybe it did vote Democrat for House, so that's Pat Ryan being Pat Ryan. Rockland on a good night, but I think you will see some backlash to the Trump years in northern New York. Like, I'm not even excusing the possibility that like Kathy Hochul pulls off the narrow win in Ontario, but then wins by like 6 statewide, because that's 100% within the realm of possibility. This is a completely different coalition from the Zeldin coalition, which I can't emphasize enough. Because if you look at New York through the lens of like, oh yeah, well Lee Zeldin sketched out the high watermark for the GOP, therefore they'll never get to stay close at all. You're going to be dead wrong, because this was not at all similar to the Zeldin coalition. Zeldin did not do well because he just did better in New York City and abandoned the rest of the state. It was a pretty universal shift towards Zeldin. Like, Essex was a Zeldin county, Broome was a Zeldin county. But even places like Dutchess, Rensselaer, Saratoga were Zeldin counties, and Schenectady was pretty close. Same to some extent with Onondaga, Monroe, and Erie. I think even Trump outperformed Zeldin in Queens, so this is a pretty different coalition to Zeldin, where Zeldin did do good with minorities, but for the most part, it was good across the board. Minorities, suburbanites, rural voters, Obama Democrats. He did good with a lot of them. Trump really didn't do well upstate, but once again, downstate is the powerhouse, and it's where most of the votes are in the state, and that was how Trump did good. So anyone who says like, "Oh, but it's Lee Zeldin," you can practically throw Lee Zeldin out the window at this point. Don't, because he was a pretty based member of Congress, but New York politics have moved on from him. He's pretty irrelevant, but you know who is relevant? AOC. Now AOC is a bit of a fire brand. Representative, New York's 14th congressional district. Relatively well known nationally. Took down a Democrat incumbent in the primary in 2018 in a massive upset. I think he was like some high ranking Democrat on a large committee. I'm not exactly sure. I don't even remember his name, to be perfectly honest. But she took him down, and ever since she's been a firebrand. Now, she's a historic underperformer. She did overperform Trump or overperform Harris in 2024, but like at the same time, so did not Meeks. But so did Grace Meng. She outperformed Harris by 17. Is that because she's some massive overperformer who, if she ran statewide, would win Hamilton County, or is that because her district experienced a lot of down ballot lag, especially among Asians in northern Queens? Well, let's uh let's take a gander at where AOC's district is based. In the Bronx, you'd be like, oh no, the Bronx. What was the county that also? What was one of those counties in the city that also shifted Republican? Uh, Quick quiz, I guess. Um, the county that shifted the most Republican in the entire state. Ooh, wow, what a surprise. Also to put this in perspective, um, in the city council elections, this area elected a Republican councilwoman, if I'm not mistaken. She took down an incumbent. That was the one Republican flip, while Democrats also flipped the seat. I've been in politics for that long. Ha ha ha. But she mostly outperformed because of down ballot lag, and also Tina Forte. This was her second election, if I'm not mistaken. And she's like the Marcus Flowers, where she just grifts for money, knowing that she'll lose from boomers who have no conceptualization of a safe district. Uh, so had Republicans nominated legitimate opposition to here, and had down ballot lag not been a thing, she would have underran Harris by like 5 to 6%. And now she's spending her time with subtle digs at Democrats. So this comes after um, Alyssa Slotkin previously said Democrats should not use words like oligarchy to describe the Trump administration, because that really doesn't resonate with voters. Some people took it as like voters don't know what the word oligarchy means. Same thing with AOC, but I think for the most part, the point Senator Slotkin, was making is that like that word is so abstract and thrown around so much that it really means nothing to voters, and I think that's true. But AOC, uh, the headline is "Shots Fired." She took a subtle dig at, or not so subtle dig, at Alyssa Slotkin by posting this in her fundraising emails. oligarchy, a government where power is concentrated in the hands of the wealthy elite. See the United States under Donald Trump 2025. It's mildly funny. It also isn't true, but I think that goes without saying. And I say that as someone who's not particularly overly pro-Trump myself. But she decided that this was a great idea, taking digs at her Democratic colleagues. Now, one, I think this means that AOC has no intention ever to seek higher office, because if these rumors, which there's been polls on this about AOC running against Chuck Schumer, which is just about the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. But she's leading Schumer by 19%. If she wants a chance of winning that primary, she should not be attacking incumbent senators who are not even up for re-election in 2026 and 2028. So they will be able to be in the Senate, endorse, rally in this primary. So genius, or she has no intention to ever seek higher office. Either way, we'll have quite a few Democrats cutting themselves tonight to cope with that. But if she does want to run for Senate, this is just about the most retarded move ever, because if she makes it past the primary, and this is what people don't understand, if you want to win, you have to have a large fundraising network. You have to have some ties to the establishment. Trump wasn't anti-establishmentarian in 2016, and he won the primary. You can win a primary with grassroots support, but you have to have the party establishment, the party base, the party network on your side. Trump, first of all, he had connections because he was rich, because he was in those spaces, because he knew quite a few politicians, especially in guess which state, quite intimately, because he had interacted with them, he had teased presidential bids before, and two, while the GOP was nowhere near happy to have him as the candidate, he wasn't such a radical change from how they were previously that they just completely rejected him. Because what an alternate 2016, if Trump was a firebrand, if he said like extremely, he still was controversial, but for the most part, he put out all branches to the GOP. But if he ran as a true centrist populist, like he was trying to run in 2000 for the reform ticket, the GOP would have just cut off support for him. And Hillary Clinton would have won Ohio. Like, politics, whether you like it or not, is now decided by money. Money, how much you can fundraise, how much you can campaign, um, your networks. Like, politics is not just like the one guy shaking his fist to the sky. I guess. The real, true populist revolution. I don't know why I had to use Job for that. Uh, but it makes sense, right, guys? I don't fucking know. Um, but that's not politics anymore. Like, perhaps in 1970, um, or even like 2010, you wouldn't need to have too much backing, to upset an incumbent who had been entrenched in the seat for a while. But like, we spent 100 million on a fucking Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. Both parties spent 50 fucking million on that of all races. Like, if you want to tell yourself for a second, they're like, oh no, they would never spend so much on a race like this. That like you don't need politics to win. Susan Crawford wins by 10. Let's snap our fingers and have the 47 million that she had turn into $447,000. How do you think it goes then? I'd be willing to bet she would have lost by 10 in that scenario because you need money to get your name out, to improve your image, to attack your opponent. You need to have these networks for get out the vote operations. You can't just go in blind. AOC's not going in blind. She's openly agitating, um, openly infuriating those networks that would serve her in a potential Senate bid. And that's why I think this is a good example. Hillary Clinton running for the Senate seat in New York. Now, she was just an open carpetbagger, and she ended up underperforming by quite a bit. Rick Lazio, who was relatively irrelevant. That was not who was expected to challenge her. It was expected to be Rudy Giuliani who challenged her, but Rudy Giuliani unfortunately had to drop out because that would have been such an insane race. Um, like it would be incredible. And it was relatively close, but what happened when Giuliani dropped out? Is that Rick Lazio did not do good after that. He significantly underran him. I think had Giuliani been the nominee, this race would have been down the wire. Um, that would have been such a cool race, especially to cover. I wish we had races like that now. We don't, unfortunately. Um, but Hillary Clinton did not have the network in New York. She did not have the backing of the Democratic establishment. She obviously had the establishment backing her, but like they weren't. They didn't back her as much as like Pat Moynihan did, and that's why you go from 1994, the Republican Revolution, to 2000, which was a neutral year where Democrats won the popular vote for president, and she did worse. I think you'll see something to some extent similar to this if Hillary Clinton runs for president. Now, if you go here to the wait, what the fuck? Further reading. Can I go to the 2000 election? This is what I hate about Wikipedia, but here. You saw on that same ballot Al Gore win the state by 25. She underran Gore by 15%. Now, one, if AOC underruns the Democratic nominee by 15%, she loses outright. But I think politics are a bit more polarized now. If you had something like this happen in 2024, Clinton would have probably only underrun Gore by like at most 8. And I think that's around the ballpark of how AOC would underrun any Democrat ticket. I don't think it'd be double digits, but I think it'd be high, especially because, like I've been saying, probably the only area where Democrats can improve in New York, 2028 is upstate. AOC is one of the worst brands imaginable for a politician. As much as polls show, oh, she's favorable with the electorate, that's bullshit. That is complete bullshit. If you're a Democrat, you'll say she's been slandered by the radical Republicans for so long. If you're a Republican, you'll say everyone has been exposed to how radical she is. But at the end of the day, she is the face of progressivism in New York. She's the face of radicalism in New York. She is not going to do well in these traditionally conservative bastions in northern New York. Now, does that mean she loses Onondaga County? No. But what happens is you have the double whammy of the state likely narrowing by quite a bit once again for president. Now, if you play the same trend in 2024, like if it shifts by just as much between 2020 and 2024 as 2024 and 2028, the state is like a 2 point Democrat win. I'm not sure about that, but like I'd say the ballpark for Democrats in New York come 2028, assuming Vance is about running even with Trump, is probably like a 6 to 8 point win. Which is insane that it's that narrow, but then Republicans are within striking distance for a Senate race. If you come here to New York and let's say we add like I don't know 10 something points the Republican margins here, like Brooklyn, we'll say like this is 2020, so we'll say like a cumulative 16 point shift to the GOP. Suffolk will say like once again a 15 point shift. 15, I said it right. Nassau shifting pretty Republican. We'll say like 21. I'd agree with that margin for the most part. Queens 21. What is that? I'm trying to add 50%. Minus 31. There we go. So it's relatively close. Um, Manhattan will shift by 15%. Here, you're already seeing the state tighten a little bit. Westchester minus 15%. There we go. Uh, Erie County, we'll skip upstate for now. Bronx, you see shift Republican by minus 33. That's still insane that Bronx is 67.5%. For Democrats, and then you see Staten Island be like I don't know, a 22-point shift. Uh, so state is already relatively close. We've only shifted the downstate region. We haven't even factored in that likely turnout is lower um, here, just because Democrats usually don't turn out. Like Democrats are not matching their 2020 turnout anywhere, and you already have the state around a 10-point margin. Now, what happens when we add AOC? Not exactly appealing too well upstate. Now, I'm gonna do 15 points just because it's kind of generic and it underscores some of these shifts plus trends. We're predicting the 2028 margin, predicting how she's going to perform. So 15 points, I feel like, is very generous to her, and already you have the state 100% within striking distance for the GOP. And like Erie, I think is the only county here that really doesn't make sense. Regardless of the day, I think she wins that. But like, I feel like this is a pretty realistic map, and like Rockland, I'm understating the GOP shift here. Um, the northern areas, the GOP would shift more. Even places like Onondaga, I think you'd have a lot more GOP support in the suburban areas of places like that than you had for Trump. Like, if you have even worse turnout, say like compared to 2020, turnout goes down another 10% in the city. Like, you're within striking distance. Relative turnout upstate, outside the city goes like another 10% or so. Like, it's a D+2 map. This is this could be 100% a competitive election. You can also take this as a prediction for the future, though. I'd say for the future, you're probably going to be just as well doing this and just saying, "Look at my future election prediction." Like even Queens is probably understating the margin long term. Um, then 1, 2, 3, 4, like 20 or so. Woohoo, guys! Look, I color map and it go red. But like I think the Democratic Party in New York has a major liability, and you can also apply this to Kathy Hochul's bid. Um, Obviously, you don't have like the yes, Vance is going to be on the ticket. He's probably going to do good. It's probably going to be like an R+2 environment or something. The state's going to be like D+6 to 8, just because of trends. Like you can make an argument that that's not the case, and New York's not going to be that close of a state come 2026. But at the same time, Democrats are running once again a very deeply flawed candidate who's probably locked in for the gubernatorial nomination. I can see momentum swing against her, but she's pulling at like 50% of the perspective primaries polls. There's quite a few of them. Unlike this retarded poll from Data for Progress, who's like just a Democrat wishcast poll. But like 2026, if Kathy Hochul does as bad upstate as she did in 2022, there's even a question of whether she could do worse. We have two prospective Republican nominees, either Mike Lawler, um, representative from the Hudson Valley, which means she probably does worse upstate than in 2022, or you have Bruce Blakeman, Nassau County executive, which means she does worse on Long Island in 2022. Or Test you have to mention about Elise Stefanik. That's retarded. And if she does run for governor, I'm shooting myself because Kathy Hochul's winning that race by 12. But I think that's a dumbass report. She's going to join the Trump administration. She's not going to run for governor. That's retarded and stupid and dumb and retarded and stupid and retarded and stupid. But you have those two, which are probably their prospective nominees. We actually had a poll come out. I forget. I think it's the same one with Hochul. Actually showed Blakeman leading against Lawler in a primary, and Lawler's much more famous than Blakeman. So I'd say as of now, Bruce Blakeman probably becomes the gubernatorial nominee as long as he can hold on in 2025. If you guys want me to do autistic rambling about Nassau County Executive in 2025, please God, please say you do. Jesus Christ, I can go on about that race for like 2 hours. But the basics of it is he probably holds on in 2025. Red or down ballot, red or in special and off year elections. He's a good nominee. Democrats are running a nobody. Jumpless War County. I've been looking at this race a lot for this reason specifically. Um, but Fields on he probably runs for governor if he wants to run for governor. He probably is the nominee, and he could legitimately take on Hochul. And then the 2028 Senate nominee, pick whoever doesn't run for that gubernatorial race. And you have your Senate nominee. Woohoo! If you could see my screen right now, there'd be confetti everywhere, like at the RNC after Trump accepted his speech, accepted his nomination after 2 hour fucking speech. We're like, the balloons fall from the sky. Woohoo! We have our Senate nominee in New York. This could be better than Mike Sapriacone, who ran for a little bit for George Santos' seat and dropped out. By the way, I'm recording this post George Santos indictment, which I think single handedly will make Nassau County and R plus 50 County stop the steal. But anyway, in all seriousness, I swear to God, this isn't even a joke. This will be a marquee race, a competitive race in 2028. If Democrats are stuck defending New York in the Senate, when at best they gain 2 Senate seats this cycle, it's not going to be a fun map for them. Because the 2028 Senate map has Democrat incumbent in Nevada. Ooh, that's bad. Oh, that's not it. Democratic incumbent in Arizona. Ooh, that's bad. That's not it. Democratic incumbent in Georgia. Ooh, that's bad. That's not it. Democratic incumbent in Pennsylvania. Ooh, that's bad. That's not it. Democratic incumbent in New Hampshire. Ooh, that's bad. That's actually it. If you add New York to that, it can get ugly real fast. And Democratic incumbent in Colorado, I don't think that's competitive. Republican incumbent in Wisconsin, as long as Vance wins the state, Republicans can run a nobody and they can win that Senate race. Republican incumbent in North Carolina, North Carolina's not going to be that close in 2028. So, relatively piss poor map for Democrats. But, anyways, we don't know. New York could pull a Texas and instantaneously revert. If there's a state that instantaneously reverts, it's Republican trend, and a reverse Texas is going to be New Jersey. I am not as confident on the trends in New Jersey as in New York. Though I definitely could see, I don't know, Nassau County just decides, fuck it, we're done with the GOP and shifts 5 points Democrat. Uh, I don't think that happens though. But we have to wait and see. Election predictions for elections 4 years from now. If you want my 2028 Senate prediction, comment down below. Like, I don't fucking know. Share with your friends. Force my videos down other people's throats, along with other things you want to force down other people's throats. I don't judge. We're a LGBTQ inclusive channel. As long as you super chat, join the membership, give me money, donate to my poll, give me money, subscribe. If I'm forgetting one thing, it's green though. Oh yeah, vote for the Green Party Canada. Um, But anyways, thank you for watching. Subscribe. A lot of stuff's happening soon. Thank you, Godspeed. Tester's done.